Well, hello there and welcome back to the Business of Becoming podcast. I'm your host, Lori Kennedy, and this is episode number 45. This episode, if you're listening in real time, also happens to be published 2 days after my 37th birthday. So I thought, why not do a birthday episode and go through the 7 big lessons that I had the privilege to learn this past year. This year was a big year for me. A lot of awesome stuff happened, and I'm excited to break it all down for you. I went through my journals and I pulled out my biggest learnings. My intention with this episode is to be fully transparent, even if it's embarrassing, so that you can learn from my experiences. Maybe some of the lessons I received this year will resonate and help you sort through some of your own stuff, or maybe not, and that's okay. Either way, thank you for listening. All of the references that I talk about in this episode can be found over on the show notes at thewbh.com/45. And please remember to subscribe to the Business of Becoming podcast. And if you have a spare minute, I would love for you to leave me a review on iTunes. They do help iTunes to determine which podcasts are popular and will help push mine up in the rankings. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with today's show. As I mentioned in the intro, if you're listening to this in real time, then 2 days ago on July 24th was my 37th birthday. Now, I'm not a huge birthday person. I don't go all out. I don't have a birthday month or anything, but I do like to compile a list of lessons I received over the last year. And I'm using the word received here very intentionally because I received them in order to become more of the person that I want to be. And my birthday is maybe the only time each year where I actually take time to reflect on my journey. And this year, I took a whole day to sit and read through my journals and sift through the notes on my phone where I keep random thoughts. Actually, here's something you might not know about me. I write letters to myself on my phone, like Dear Lori kind of letters. Why, you might be asking? Well, because I'm a single mom. And at the moment, I don't have a partner to share my life with. I don't have anyone to share those random experiences with and silly things my kids do and funny thoughts I think and good things that happened and bad things that happen. And if you're married with kids, you might know what I mean. And if you're divorced, you for sure know what I mean because that goes away the minute you get divorced. I used to have it, where you text your spouse or your person and tell them ridiculous things that happened to you that day. And then, like I said, when you get divorced, that goes away. And so instead of just not documenting them, I write letters to myself on my phone, and I'll share more about this in one of my lessons on how I don't feel lonely even though I'm alone. Anyways, as I was going through the notes, I started to see a theme running through this past year, and I decided to call this year Repetitive Healing. So this past year for me was all about doing the repetitive work to heal myself, both my body and my soul. And to be honest, I've done a really good job at it. And yes, healing is an ongoing thing, but man, oh man, have I come a long way this year, and I am damn proud of myself. In fact, until I started to do the work to heal, I didn't really understand just how messed up I was. You'll see what I mean as I dive into the 7 lessons. So let's start with lesson number 1. The vision is still my everything. So if you've been in my world for long enough, then you know that I am a huge promoter of having a vision for your life and your business. And I actually don't really understand how people operate without a clear written down vision for their life. So for me, my vision is my motive. It's the thing that gets me out of bed each day. It's the thing that keeps me inspired and pushes me to do better. So after my marriage ended and at the end of 2015, I didn't actually rewrite my vision. I kept it as it was until very recently, and I think that I did this simply because I was still in the mode of this isn't fair. I want that life that I was working so hard to achieve, and I also know myself well enough to know that there would come a time when I would be ready to rewrite my vision for my business and life, and so I waited until I felt I was ready. And I finally felt ready after celebrating living in my house for 2 years. You know, when something momentous happens and you track, like the days, like it's been 32 days, it's been 7 weeks, it's been 9 months, and it's been 1 year or 2 years. At some point, you just stop tracking and move on with your life. Well, I decided that at the 2-year mark of my marriage ending and at the 2-year mark of living in my house, that I would stop tracking and just move on. And part of the moving on for me was creating a new vision for my life. Plus, it was the 5-year anniversary of that first vision I created back in 2012. And man, oh man, loads of things have changed since then. And so in fairness to that first vision that I created back in 2012, that was before I knew what was in store for me in terms of kids and their sports. So at that point, my daughter was 5 and my son was 2. And if you've ever had any desire to live like a nomad or to have a laptop lifestyle, don't put your kids into any activities, especially a team sport, because my son playing hockey changed the vision for the time being. So doing my vision again, this time with the majority of a whole new perspective on who I am and who I want to be and what I have and what I want and all of that good stuff was really interesting. The most interesting thing, though, is that the major element of my vision around my work and the impact remained the same. So my vision for my business is still and will always be for my brand and my business to transform the way alternative health professionals feel about and run their businesses. That, like I said, hasn't changed. Here's where the big lesson came into play. The day-to-day, the how I was going to achieve this goal has dramatically changed over the years. As I look at my business now versus back in 2012, the only thing that's still the same is the holistic weight management system. That's it. My current business name, my brand, the programs and services, they're all different now. Back then, I was so sure that I was going to have hundreds of WOW licensees all over the world running my WOW weight loss system. Nope. That program doesn't even exist anymore. I haven't run that in years. So what stood out to me, which might benefit you, was that I was never really married to any one idea or way of doing something. I thought that that's what was going to get me to the vision, but when I saw that the WOW license and the certification wasn't working, I killed it quickly and I did something else. The lesson for me is to focus on the impact, the big outcome, the end result. That how I'm going to get there will change over time. That how I'm going to achieve that impact, that big result, will change with me, my season of life, the industry, the technology, and if I'm being honest, the how isn't really what matters. It comes and goes, as in the example of programs I used to offer that doesn't even exist anymore. So from redoing my vision, I really learned not to be married to any one thing, to any one idea, to any one program, to any one process. And in order for me to succeed in business and in my life, I must remain fluid to any and all ways of it happening. I must focus on the outcome and allow the how to present itself over time, which means I need to be paying attention and I need to not put restrictions on how I'm going to achieve my vision, because putting restriction and being married to any one idea isn't allowing for possibility to flow into my life. So when I realized that, it actually felt like a huge relief for me, because when I look back, even to making my No Plan B commitment in 2011, I didn't know how I was going to make it happen, right? I never knew how I was going to make all of those things happen. And reflecting on this lesson, especially over the last 5 years, and specifically over the last year, really allowed me to release any expectation to know the how. Instead, I'm just going to do what I've always done, which is take massive imperfect action and see what happens next. Lesson number 2. I have an energy breaking point, and that is to be respected. So what I really mean by this is that I am human and I have limitations. Surprisingly, for me, I actually have limitations, and I most definitely have a breaking point. And on the one hand, I do know that my breaking point is probably well past most people's, and I can handle a lot. But what I've learned over the last year is that just because I can handle a lot doesn't mean that I have to. So how I live my life and what I choose to give energy to is very much my choice. And I found I was giving away way too much energy to things that I thought were good ideas. And I wasn't reserving my energy for the things that I really needed. What I honestly didn't anticipate was how much energy I'd need in order to do the healing work that I desperately needed and wanted to do. I guess if I'm really thinking about it, I didn't realize just how deep that wound went. And I guess because my wound wasn't external, meaning because I couldn't see the hurt and the pain, not just from my divorce, but like the years, right? Of all of the things, because I couldn't see it on the outside of my body, I didn't give myself the rest and recuperation and the energy that I needed in order to heal. So healing a wound, we know this, whether it's internal or external, takes a tremendous amount of energy. And I mean, like when someone has surgery, they take time off to heal. When a person gets sick, they rest until they feel better. I was trying to do all of the things for all of the years and heal my soul at the same time, and it just wasn't working. I wasn't feeling the way that I wanted to feel. I wasn't showing up as I wanted to show up in literally all areas of my life. And what I've come to learn is that when I'm operating out of alignment, when I'm operating to meet other people's expectations or from a place of ego, the universe sends me signs, and those signs get bigger and bigger and bigger until I am forced to listen. So I had to make some very hard and very expensive decisions because feeling the way that I want to feel is more important than just doing things because, right? Like sometimes we all just do things just because we think we should. So I hope this is making sense. The first big decision that I had to make, which I've talked about before, was to not run my annual event, the Wellness Business Summit, that I've run every year for the past 5 years. That was a hard one because I love that event. It's like my third child. It means so much to me. And I hope that it means a lot to my community too, except that I just didn't have the heart for it this year. I didn't have the energy to pour into it. And because of that, I knew that if I chose to go ahead with it, I'd only be doing it because it was expected of me and because I would be afraid that someone else would take the spot. Producing an event because of my ego is not a good idea. So I decided to take a break, and oh my gosh, I am so glad that I did because it created space for me to do the work that I really needed to do. And don't worry, it will be back in June of 2019, bigger and better than ever. So the next hard and very expensive decision I had to make was to either continue with a new company that I had formed or to close the doors. I had struggled with this decision for months, and I mean it, like months. I would write out the pros and cons. I went to therapy about it. I talked with my mentors about it. Like, I would say it was a good 3 months until it became painfully obvious to me that I needed to chalk it up to a loss and close the doors, which I did. I actually gave that company away for free without wanting a penny for it in return. Why? Because if I kept going at the rate that I was going, I knew that I was about to hit my breaking point, and no amount of money is worth that. So I realize that it might sound silly to others that I make major life decisions based on how I want to feel. Like, will this thing or that decision get me closer to how I want to feel? Which really is meaning, will this thing or that decision get me closer to the vision for my business and my life? Or will it push me away from how I want to feel? I believe that we get what we ask for. And so if I'm living in a way that is asking for a breakdown simply because I'm afraid to make a better feeling decision, then guess what I'm going to get? So the big lesson for me about that is that I most certainly have a breaking point, and that I need to be much more careful and much more thoughtful about my decisions so that I can better guard and protect my energy. Lesson number 3. The expectation that I should date makes me feel lonely. So this is something that feels a little bit TMI or a little bit vulnerable for me to share, because I don't really talk about my personal life in regards to like my romantic life. But this has been a really interesting lesson for me this year for a couple of reasons. So I know what you're thinking, when I said the expectation that I should date makes me feel lonely. And I know that nothing can make me feel any which way unless I give it the power to. And so rationally, I know this, believe me. However, I am human. Not only am I human, I'm also a highly sensitive human. And so the expectation that I should date, or even dating, opened me up to a whole new world of stigma and expectations that I had not been exposed to before. And so for me, I'm an introvert. I need to be alone, right? I have 2 very active kids. I extrovert a whole ton as part of my business. And so I enjoy my alone time, even though I don't have my kids on certain weeknights and every other weekend. I work a lot and I choose to work a lot. And so when I have a day or a night to myself, I enjoy it. And when I say alone, I mean alone with a capital A, because I know that I'm never really alone. And so I like to do a lot of things by myself, to be honest. And I never really felt lonely until I started dating this past year. And so I've thought about why the dating caused me to feel lonely, or shouldn't say caused me, triggered me. And so here's what I've come up with. There's a couple of things. One, because the dating showed me how uncomfortable I am in my feminine energy. That was a huge awakening that I was not prepared for. And so the result of that trigger was me realizing that I actually had to do something pretty dramatic to get back into my feminine, to get back into my body, to feel sexy for myself by myself, because it may be a long time before I'm with someone that I feel comfortable being that intimate with. And so that for me was a huge awakening, because I felt very uncomfortable playing the role of, like, I guess a single dating female, where I had to be flirty and, dress up and sexy. And I hadn't done it in so long, since, for years. And I was not comfortable in that role. And so that made me feel weird and lonely and alone and awkward. And so I actually joined a dance class, a heels dance class called Army of Sass. And I can't even describe to you the wonders that it did for me. It was never about a man. It was never about, oh, let me go and feel sexy for someone else. It was the knowing that I had to reconnect to that feeling for myself, by myself, and not for any other person. And so this dance class, it took me until week 6. So it was a 10-week class where we had to put on a show at the end of the year. And maybe you saw it on my Instagram feed just recently. But it took me until about week 6 to really feel connected to my body, to feel good moving my hips in certain ways. Like, it was such a foreign feeling for me to feel sexy in my movement. And so that was a huge learning for me, that I need to continue to do these things for myself to feel that way with or without a man. And I think this is relative whether you're in a relationship or you're not. I think that we all have to take responsibility for feeling feminine or masculine without someone else causing you to feel that way. And it was something that I didn't know that I was missing until it was shoved in my face. So that made me very uncomfortable. And the second reason that I think dating triggered me to feel lonely is because it's unconventional for a woman of my age, especially because I have 2 children, to be okay not being in a relationship, right? To be okay as being single. And I kind of relate it to couples who are childless by choice, right? It makes other people uncomfortable, especially when I get this. So Lori, how's your love life? You dating anyone? No. Oh, why not? I'm sure there are plenty of men who'd love to date you. I'm sure there are. I'm good, thanks. Right? Like, it's just, I know it's like common conversation. And again, I relate it to like the couples who are childless by choice, where you have to sort of navigate that. But it's like every time I have that conversation, I get this look of pity, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not dating. Nope, by choice. I'm good, thanks. And it's kind of like, you are? You're good? How is that? How is that possible? And so it was really made clear to me this year that there is a stigma around being a single, successful adult female. Like, I can't count the number of times that men, especially, who I potentially was going to date, when I said that I owned my house, they were like shocked, right? And when they asked if I got alimony and I said no, it was like, what? How is that possible? And so I think it's just not typical. It's not common. And I get that. But that made me feel uncomfortable. And that made me feel like the odd man out, like lonely and weird and awkward. And so I get that this particular lesson might not resonate to most of you listening, but navigating those uncomfortable conversations, navigating the confidence to do a lot of the things alone as a female, going to parties and going to weddings and just doing a lot of traveling and like just doing a lot of those things by myself, for myself, because they feel good without needing a man, and being okay with, like being really okay with that, has been a big learning lesson for me this year. All right, lesson number 4, test, don't guess. So this is kind of a long one. I'm going to give you the context. When was it? So probably at the beginning of 2018, I had a pain in my armpit. And, for women, you don't like mess around with like a lump and a pain in your armpit. So I went to my doctor and I ended up going for an ultrasound where they found a complex cyst. Now, I'll say I'm totally fine. I've had all the tests. I'm totally fine. But that started me going down this path of not wanting to guess what's wrong with me anymore, right? That really went down the path of, okay, I have fibrocystic breasts. They thought that I could potentially have this complex cyst. I went for the mammogram. I went for another ultrasound. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to be 37. I don't have, thank God, a family history of cancer, but I do have mental illness. And basically, since I was 19, I've been operating under the assumption that I have candida, that I have leaky gut. I've been operating under the assumption for years that I had adrenal fatigue. And I was just feeling like ass, honestly, for most of the beginning of 2018. For months, I was not feeling good, and I was so done with guessing. So I decided to stop guessing and, based on my symptoms, and I wanted to spend the money, honestly, for the first time ever, to get to the bottom of my own health issues. And because of my professional education as a registered holistic nutritionist, I just, based on my symptoms, assumed that I knew what was wrong with me. But boy, was I wrong. It turns out I'm actually a hypochondriac, and I don't actually have candida or leaky gut or adrenal fatigue. In fact, I barely have any food sensitivities or micronutrient deficiencies at all, other than to gluten and wheat, which was confirmed via a genetic test. So I set out on this path to find not only a functional medicine doctor, but an MD, because I wanted to pay for medical care. I wanted to pay for one doctor who could liaise with my GP, who could liaise with the hospital and the breast clinic that I was doing all the testing with, because I'm not a doctor. I have no idea. And I needed someone to look at my whole body. I needed someone who could get my medical tests from the hospital and the radiologist and do functional medicine testing and put together a course of action, because I was just done feeling like ass. And so I found the doctor. Her name's Dr. Jennifer Perlman. I'll link to her in the show notes, which can be found at thewbh.com/45. She also does a lot of cosmetics, so don't let that throw you. She's a super renowned functional medicine MD. So when she told me the results of my tests, I literally sat there and I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? You mean I don't have candida? I don't have leaky gut? I don't have an autoimmune? I don't have thyroid problems? What's wrong with me then? And before I go on, I just want to say, I recognize that some of you have those things, diagnosable things. What I'm talking about is I thought I did. So I was operating under the assumption my identity was wrapped up in me having candida, right? Oh, I have candida. Oh, I have leaky gut. Oh, I have adrenal fatigue. Well, when you convince yourself of these things, guess what happens? You feel like that, right? And so I'm not in any way negating that these are real problems. I know that they are, believe me. I just didn't have them, right? I thought I did, but I didn't. And because I didn't actually test for so long, I just continued to feel like crap, right? And I tried to make changes, but because I'm human and life is busy and I stress eat sometimes, it's not always easy to stick to eating the way that you should eat. I am not a perfect nutritionist by any stretch of the imagination. And so I'm sharing this with you because I know a lot of you feel like ass. I know a lot of you don't feel good. And I know a lot of you go based off symptoms alone. And so test, don't guess, right? And so what came out of me testing was compliance. What came out of me doing these tests was not only definitive proof of certain things that I do need to do and certain things that I don't need to worry about. And what that did for me was shifted my mindset to, oh, well, I don't eat that much gluten, or I don't have that much grains, when really I take a bite of my kid's sandwich, or I eat some cereal. I'm a mom, I'm a working mom, and I'm human. And so I probably was eating more than I recognized, and it was doing a number on my immune system. And so the testing that I did One was called Nutrigenomics, and this is how specific foods influence genes. The other one was called Fluids IQ, which is for micronutrient deficiencies, and the other one was called Zonulin, which was for gut permeability, and I also did a dysbiosis test. So I did not have any signs of dysbiosis. My gut permeability, they said, was like the best they'd ever seen, which for me was shocking because I was convinced I had like serious leaky gut. And Fluids IQ is food sensitivities, and I barely had any, like barely. And so what came out of the Nutrigenomics actually was really cool. And it was an elevated risk for gene mutation for the MTHFR, which is folate and high homocysteine levels. And so for me, which is really good because I now know that I have to get methylated folate and potentially B12 shots, and I have to avoid things with high homocysteine levels, right? Like high histamine foods, right? I was eating a ton of strawberries, a ton of chocolate. Like I couldn't figure out why I was congested because I wasn't eating dairy. I didn't think I was eating that much gluten. Like I couldn't figure it out. And then I also have an elevated risk for gene mutation for vitamin D, which always my vitamin D levels were low. That was leading to me feeling fatigued, but I was taking like 10,000 IUs a day. Wasn't making a difference. Well, now I know I need shots, right? I have a high risk for gluten intolerance. So I have a genetic mutation for gluten intolerance, which was affecting my immune system, right? And how I know this is because I started getting blood tests. And after I took out gluten, my white blood cell count decreased, right? So these specific things were made very clear to me once I started testing. Now in my head, I have celiac, so I don't touch it anymore, right? Because my blood results show it, my genes show it, and it's just not an option anymore. So I don't even take the bite of my kid's leftover grilled cheese sandwich, right? Even if it is with gluten-free bread, because it's still a grain. And I'm trying to reduce my inflammatory markers. I have a medium risk of elevated estrogen levels and a medium risk of tissue damage due to estrogen byproducts, says my genetic makeup, right? So I no longer guess, which is amazing because now I can put together a plan, and I haven't felt this good by just simple changes. Like I'm not on a gazillion supplements. I don't have to avoid all the foods, right? I did an AIP protocol because I just needed to get rid of inflammation, and I've slowly added them back, and so far I'm fine because I took out the foods that I tested sensitive to. So all of this is to say, if you're feeling like ass, stop guessing. Go spend the money on some tests. Go find a functional medicine practitioner, maybe even a naturopathic doctor, but get the tests. Like figure out what's actually going on with you, and then you will know for certain and you won't play around with it anymore, right? And so that was a huge lesson for me, was to not guess anymore. And now that I know, I'm able to just abide by it because it's my genes, right? It's not even like a food sensitivity where you take it out. Like this is my genetic expression is saying this. So bye-bye gluten and bye-bye grains, right? And that's just the way it is. So lesson number 5. This one's on segmenting relationships. This was a big one for me this year. So like I said, I'm an introvert. I don't have a lot of energy for certain things. But I also have high expectations of relationships. And so for me, I have different pockets of friends. And for a while, that felt odd to me. Because I have my mom friends, and then I have my best friend, and then I have like my entrepreneurial friends, and then I have friends that are my business friends, but also my best friends who know all the truth about everything. And for a while, it felt really weird. And I know that some people have work friends and then they have their social friends. But I think for me, it felt really weird because certain segments of my friends don't know about other areas of my life. And I wasn't sure if that was okay. For example, I love my mom friends. But they don't really know this part of my life. They don't need to, is what I've come to the conclusion about. That doesn't mean that I'm not close with them. That doesn't mean that I'm not open and vulnerable. And it also doesn't mean that I'm lying. Even my longest best friend, she doesn't really know about my entrepreneurial world. I share with her some things. I'm sure I could share more, but I have other people to share that with. And so for me, I went through a period this year where it kind of felt like I was pretending with some people because I'm normally so open. I'm normally just like, sure, I'm an open book. What do you want to know? But when I would share certain things with certain people, it was uncomfortable for them. Right? It was uncomfortable for them. And then I'm assuming it was uncomfortable for them based on the reaction. And then it was uncomfortable for me, and it just kind of got awkward. And I feel self-conscious because I don't want people to judge me. And, there's just too much emotion wrapped up all in this. And so over many conversations with my therapist, I came to understand that each segment of relationships that I have with my mom friends, my oldest, of 20 years, like my best friend who's been through all my personal things with me, my mentors, my entrepreneurial friends, and then like my two sort of know everything about me, both from the business side and from like my personal side, right? I've come to understand and respect and honor that each relationship is fulfilling in its own way, and that not all of my friendships need to know everything about me all the time. And that was a huge relief, right? And in the sense that it's like not one person can fulfill all the needs. I need to have mom friends. I want to have mom friends so I can just be a mom and complain about my kids and have a glass of wine and go to the zoo, not by myself all the time, right? Like, I cherish those relationships. I cherish the relationship with my best friend. I might not see her as often as I would like, and I might not be able to, celebrate certain things with her or, share in certain things because she just doesn't get it. That's not her fault. I have other people for that. So that was a huge lesson for me because I honestly felt like I was a liar. I felt like I was keeping things from people because my assumption was that all of my friends should know everything about my entire life, and that's just not necessary, right? And I'm going to assume that you listening, you have segments of friends too. And perhaps you feel resentful or like you're lying because they're not as supportive or involved or understanding as you would like them to be. Though, if that's true, think about the feelings that those friends fulfill for you, right? Maybe they're not the ones to support your business aspirations. Maybe you need to go find other friends to do that, right? Maybe those friends are like more of your social friends and more of your like low key, hang out on a Saturday type friends. That's okay. That's what I realized this year was that I'm not hiding anything. It's just I have segments of friends for different areas of my life, and those segments fulfill different needs that I have, and not everyone needs to fulfill every need that I have. And that was a huge lesson for me this year because it was really weighing on me. But it's all good now. Lesson number 6. I think you're going to appreciate this one, you guys. I have no idea what I'm doing, most of the time. So the only way that I can describe it is I'm going down this long journey and I'm paving the road 10 feet ahead of me as I go. I don't know what's 100 feet ahead of me or 1,000 feet ahead of me. I'm not there yet. So I don't know what kind of concrete I'll need or what kind of pavement I'll need, or I have no idea. And I've come to surrender to that I only know what I need to know to get me to the next 10 feet. And at the next 10 feet, I'll go and learn what needs to get me to the next 10 feet. And then there, I'll go and learn maybe what needs to get me to the next 50 feet. But I've surrendered to the fact that most of the time, I don't know what I'm doing because I've never done this before. Now, if I went to go start a business from scratch again, I'd know what I was doing. But I've never gone this far before. I don't have any past prior experience. I mean, I started as a personal trainer and then I became a nutritionist and now I do this. I failed grade 10 math, grade 11 math. Like, I don't know. I never took a finance course or an accounting course. Like, I have no idea. So the lesson for me is that that's awesome. That because I've surrendered to the fact that I don't know what I'm doing, my only option is to go seek out mentorship from people that do. And to find those people that are doing it in a way that I admire and respect and want to emulate. Have I made mistakes in choosing the wrong people? For sure. Right? Have I flushed money down the toilet in masterminds that just didn't give me what I needed to go to the next 10 feet? For sure. Lots of money. I think that's normal. Right? Because I've surrendered to the fact that I don't know what I'm doing most of the time, it's easy for me to not feel bad about it. It's easy for me to be like, well, I don't know what I'm doing, so who does? Who knows what they're doing? And that's why it's easy for me to invest in myself. It's easy for me to go and invest in sales training and in organizational and team management, because if I want to get to the next level, which I do, that vision that I aspire to achieve requires me to get skills in the areas that I don't know what I'm doing. And I firmly believe that we all have choices. I can try and figure it out on my own. I could read a book, right? I don't want to do that. I feel like I don't have time to waste. We're moving so fast and I want to move this fast that I don't want to screw it up. And the truth is, when you're playing at a certain level, there's a lot more to lose if you try and go at it alone, right? When you're playing at a level where you're paying certain people's salaries and they're relying on you, I feel the weight of the responsibility to make sure that I do everything in my power to learn as fast as I can how to get to the next 10 feet, right? And if I don't invest and if I don't go to school and learn, if I'm not schooled, that's on me. Right? The buck stops with me, just as in your own business and in your own life, the buck stops with you, right? And for me, I believe that it's my personal responsibility to make sure that I just know how to pave, the road for the next 10 feet, right? I don't put that pressure on myself anymore. And I guess this was the biggest learning this year, was like, it's okay that I don't know how to get to the next level. How could I be expected to know? I've never done this before, right? And I felt like I had to pretend like I did know. Like, I know how to do this. I know how to grow the company. No, actually, I don't. I have no idea. I just know what to do based off of where we are now, but I have no idea how to double or triple what we're doing now. So I got to go to school and I got to learn. I got to invest in myself. And that was a big learning for me this year, was that it's okay that I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't need to pretend like I do. I know what I'm doing right now because I got us here, but I don't know how to get us to the next level. So I got to go invest in myself to learn how to do that. That was a huge weight lifted off my shoulders this year when I could stop pretending like I knew what I was doing to get us to the next level in terms of growing my team, in terms of the real like adulting things like human resources and payroll and money and finances and growth and like, you know, having a leadership team and an executive team and all of that stuff. Like, I have no idea. Like, I'm in my head, I'm like, I'm just a nutritionist. Like, I don't know. Right. And so that was a huge learning lesson for me this year, that it's not expected of me to know how to get to the next level, but it is expected of me to go and learn how to get to the next level. And then last but not least, I saved the best learning lesson for last. Lesson number 7. Healing is a repetitive act and all that's left is faith. So I saved this one for last because for me, it is the most important lesson probably ever. And I'm sure I'm going to learn it over and over again as the years go by. So I realized at some point in this year that I really wanted to heal all my stuff thus far, or at least heal the biggest pieces so that I would no longer be triggered, so that I could have interactions without residual emotional pain, so that I could process feelings quickly and remove them from my body quickly, or better yet, have interactions and not even be fazed by them. So that instead of feeling fear and anger and resentment or whatever it was that I was feeling, I would instead be able to feel compassion and allow whatever it was that I was feeling to pass through me. So that instead of feeling like I needed to control the situation because I can't, I would be able to really rely on my faith with a level of certainty that it would work out as it should. And as much as I've been working on it over the years, I needed to up my spiritual game. And I honestly didn't know if it was possible. And I'll also put a disclaimer. I am not saying that in any way I am perfect or that I no longer do things that trigger other people. All I'm saying is that for my own well-being, I knew I wanted and needed to acquire skills and a level of spiritual faith so that I could move through circumstances without them affecting me so deeply. Again, I am a highly sensitive person. I am an intuitive empath. So I really needed to learn skills to let certain circumstances pass through me. I'm also sure that you have relationships in your life, whether it's a spouse or an ex or a parent or a sibling, where at some point you are triggered and those feelings inhabit your body and your mind, and they do not leave for days or sometimes longer, where you keep having the same conversation over and over again in your mind and you feel like you're going all crazy. I wanted to build up enough emotional resilience and spirituality so that feeling that way, where it would be sort of like weighing on me physically and emotionally, would be few and far between. So I invested again in therapy. I'm a huge advocate for all different types of therapy, energetic therapy. I've been working with a woman called Meredith Deasley for years. And I also invested in another energy therapist this past year who works with the Akashic Records. I'm not even going to try and explain what they are. I will just link to her name. Her name is Felicia. I can't even describe what it's like to find an energy therapist that can actually remove energy from your body. Because energy cannot be created or destroyed, but sometimes we hold on to energy from either this life or past lives that are not serving us. And there was a point where I realized, like, okay, I'm getting pretty good at processing through feelings, but I still felt like in my body there was trapped energy. Like there was certain things that were so fear-based that weren't explained. Like I couldn't explain why I felt certain ways, and it wasn't anxiety. And so I started to work with Felicia, and she did a bunch of sessions on me, and those feelings are no longer, which again, might sound a bit woo-woo. It might sound unbelievable. That's cool. Like, you know, you do you, I'll do me. That's cool. I'm sharing this because this was a huge learning lesson for me this year, that I can talk and talk and talk and process and meditate and, you know, go to yoga and lift weights and do all of that stuff. But at least in what I believe, I needed to work with someone who could release trapped energy from past lives, from this life, cut cords, in order for me to heal and in order for me to move on. Now, I'm sharing this with you because if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to assume that you're more open-minded than the average person. I don't necessarily share this with, you know, regular people, let's just say, because they're going to look at me like I'm crazy, and they're going to look at me like that can't really work, and that's cool. And maybe it is a little bit, I guess, Pollyanna, as they would say, for me to believe in this. But I think until you go through it yourself and you release energy that's trapped in your body and you feel relief, you might not believe that it works. And that's cool. I'm not here to convince you. The lesson for me this year was that I had deep-rooted emotional stuff that I had to acknowledge, that I had to process through. And there are certain circumstances that I still have to deal with where the only skill that I have in my toolbox is prayer. And praying to whatever you want to call it, universe, God, the divine, whatever, that the circumstance will work out just as it should. And so for me, the lesson really was learning the right words, right? Learning how to pray and ask for support in a way that wasn't restrictive, in a way that wasn't controlling, in a way that allowed the situation to unfold for the best interests of those involved. And there are certain circumstances where that's all that I had. And just like the energy work, until you go through it and you feel relief, you don't believe it. Well, for me, until I started to pray and ask for miracles in the right way, which was me not trying to control the outcome, I didn't see that it worked. And over time, when I asked for things in the right way and it resulted in that, I could relax and my faith muscle got stronger. And if you've ever strengthened your faith muscle, then you know how it feels, because now I am not as fearful. I am not as anxious. And again, whether that's Pollyanna or not, I don't care. I feel better. And that for me has been life-changing. I've always believed in God. I never had a deep-rooted faith practice as I do now. And I'm sharing this with you because perhaps you can take something away from this specific lesson where at the very least you're not trying to control the outcome, but you're asking for help so that it serves the people involved in the best way it should, right? And so there's really not much to it other than that. For me, the lesson was releasing control. For me, the lesson was consistent practice. There were definitely times, just like how I didn't want to go to the gym. I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to, journal. I didn't want to go to therapy. I didn't want to do those things because it's just easier to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. However, this whole journey of mine, as named the podcast, The Business of Becoming, my job on this planet is to live up to my fullest potential. And I can't do that if I don't face my own shit. And that's what I really learned this year. In conclusion to my 7 lessons in this podcast episode, that's what I really learned, is that if I don't own where I'm at, and if I don't face where I'm at, and if I don't go out and get the support that I need, I'm not going to live up to my own potential. And that sucks. And so I hope this was helpful for you. I kind of got really personal here and I wasn't expecting to, but that's just how it goes. So I'd love to know from you if any of the lessons that I shared resonated. You can come and find me on Instagram at Lori Kennedy Inc. You can find me on Facebook under the same name. You can leave a review on iTunes. Either way, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you again soon.